Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord. Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord.
Welcome to The Notice, where together we notice the mercy of God. I'm Susan Hoekstra, your host. On today's episode of The Notice, are you someone who works so hard but wonders why you haven't achieved what you hoped or planned for? Maybe you feel that no matter what you accomplish, it's just not enough. Join me for this episode where I talk with Rachael Jenneman about her new book, Underachiever. Listen in as we discuss our desire to achieve, how it gets out of control, and new ways to rest, wait, and take notice of what God has for us. Rachael Jenneman is the wife of David and mom to Paige, Caleb, and Jace. Both she and David are known as first-generational Christians. They gave their hearts to Jesus as teenagers at the same church where they met and never looked back. She is a former staff pastor turned radio broadcaster and podcaster of the Unique on Purpose podcast. When not hanging out with their family or radio audience, Rachael speaks at various churches, conferences, and camps. She is the author of 2 books, The Real War on Woman, and her most recent release, Underachiever. So, Rachael, welcome back to The Notice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is your second time
yes.
with us because it's your second book.
Yes.
All right, you did it. You wrote a second book.
I did.
Oh, I know. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Well, congratulations on the book and its release. It just came out, right?
Yes, it did, just a couple days ago.
Yes, and I'm really excited about this topic, but kind of nervous. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you, Rachael, kind of hit a nerve.
Okay.
It hit a little bit of a nerve. And a good one in the sense that, oh, wow, we need to be talking about this because I think it's a kind of like a secret thing that happens in your thought process, right?
Well, you think no one else feels this way.
No one else. Yeah, just me. Just me who feels like I never can get it together or I'm not enough. So obviously you must have some experience in this. But tell us, why did you write Underachiever?
I'll be honest with you, it is such a blur. The last book that I wrote, when you start writing books, and you know this because you've written a book, suddenly you get 1,000,001 ideas of books that you can write. So my wall is covered with outlines of the books that I want to write. And I was actually in the middle of another book that it was kind of the sequel to the last book that I wrote. But I kept looking at that outline. And I don't even remember writing it. I don't remember anything. I just know that it's on my wall. And I just kept feeling this nudge from the Holy Spirit of, this is you. And this is what you need to focus on right now. Because I am just that person that, just like you said, no matter how much I achieve in life, no matter what I do, it is never enough. Like everything I do, we're humans, so we compare ourselves to other people. We see what other people have, and we're going, well, I'm not as successful as they are. Or the world tells us, and even the church too, tells us we need to do things in a certain way. And if we haven't done them in that certain way, then somehow we failed. When we hit a certain age, somehow we've failed. We even have today what's known as the quarter life crisis. You know, it used to be a midlife crisis. You hit middle age and suddenly you're trading in your car and everything else for newer models, and you're getting tattoos and you're jumping out of airplanes, trying to make up for lost time. But what studies are finding is that there are people now going through quarter life crises because they were told they had to have it all together. At least us millennials, anyway, we were told we had to have it all together pretty much by 25.
But you do, Rachael.
But I don't feel like it. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Like I will never forget our first interview. And I made a comment of me in radio, and I said, I feel like I'm not reaching people for Jesus. And your jaw just dropped, like the look on your face, like, are you serious right now?
Right.
But that's how I feel. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm not doing enough. And so if I could just be like Olivia Benson in Law and Order Special Victims Unit, where I'm rescuing people every single day, then maybe if I could be like House, where I'm solving problems in the medical field, then maybe I will have done something with my life. Or if I could just be like Susie Q, who is a millionaire from high school, then maybe I'll have done something with my life,
Right.
But it's just that thing of no matter what I've done, it's not enough. And then that becomes your identity, really.
Yeah. So do you think it's okay to desire achievement? Is this the struggle, or should we just not desire achievement?
Well, like anything else, I think God has put a lot in us. The problem is when we make an idol out of it. So it's kind of like asking a woman, is it okay to want to feel beautiful? Well, of course it's okay to want to feel beautiful and to put makeup on and to get that new haircut. It's when you take it to the extreme of vanity. God has placed in all of us a desire to achieve. That's how we're going to enhance the kingdom, is us making achievements. The problem comes when it becomes our idol, when it becomes our identity, that the only way that I'm worth something is if I have done X, Y, and Z.
Well, I like in the book because you say that driving force for feeling not enough, this concept of not being good enough, can be good and bad. Like you talk about turning love to lust, money to greed, power to pride, things like that. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, yeah, kind of. So when it comes to the feelings of not enough and whether they're good or bad, I talk in the book about Rainn Wilson, and if anybody's watched the television show The Office, he played the character Dwight Schrute, Rainn Wilson, and last year he was on a podcast with Bill Maher, and he said, and I think it went viral for a reason because it blew everybody's minds. He was on one of the top show at the time in the early 2000s. Primetime TV is watched by millions. Was nominated for several Emmys.
Great show.
Yeah, hilarious. And he said it wasn't enough. Sure, I'm on the best TV show there is right now, but why am I not making movies? Okay, yeah, I'm making all of this money, but I'm not making millions. Why am I not, even though I'm playing Dwight Schrute on this TV show that everybody loves, why am I not Will Ferrell in X movie? Why am I not Jack Black in X movie? I mean, it just was not enough for him, and it becomes bad when we're not enjoying what has already been given to us. Right. We're not basking in that moment. Like, we're looking at him going, how could you feel like that's not enough? Like, that's an amazing achievement to be on a television show that is Emmy Award winning and all these things, but yet inside of him, it's not enough. But also, we've got to look at the other side too. Not enough can be a good thing because it can help us to strive to make things better. So we have to be careful as to not be thankful for where we're at and bask in that moment. Right. But then there's the other side that says, okay, well then how can I make things better? Like take, oh my gosh, the brothers, the ones who flew. What are the Wright brothers? The Wright brothers. Okay, take them for example. What was their flight? Like 16 seconds? Something like that. Their first flight. But they said, okay, that's good, but we can make this better. Right. And now we have aviation all over the world. It's nothing but a thing for me to hop on an airplane, and less than a day later, I'm sitting in England or I'm sitting in Italy. I mean, we went from, okay, this is good, but not necessarily good enough. I think we can make this better. So there's two ways that you can do that.
Well, this feeling of not good enough, you talk about it a little bit in the book about, I don't want to be a downer, but actually we're not good enough.
And that's true. Yes. Right? Yeah, we're not good enough
because I struggle with this concept. And of course, I wrote the book of Firm Grasp, which is just about validation and affirmation. And sometimes I think there's some intertwining between that feeling of underachieving, not being good enough, and not being affirmed. Yeah. Because in my book, I talk about validation being acknowledging where somebody's at. Doesn't mean you're agreeing with them or anything like that. Like, let's say you come home and you say, I'm tired. And I go, oh, you look tired. Is everything okay? You validate that they're tired, right? But you're not putting a value on it. You're not saying, well, you're stupid because you're tired. You should have went to bed last night early because you're tired. It's not putting a value association on it. Where affirmation does, it says they give a approval status or a star, if you will, Right. So I bring that up because this feeling of not being good enough, I talk about in my book too. And I talk a little bit about like we're not worthy because of our sin, okay, because we make mistakes and because we have limitations. So that puts us there. And I think sometimes people who have this compulsion or whatever, obsessiveness, if it's too far, to achieve, are trying to satisfy something. It could be this, you're not getting validation and affirmation. Like, isn't it good enough that somebody claps after a performance? Why do we need more?
Well, yeah, why didn't I get the standing ovation?
Right. This feeling of not being good enough is, I don't know, I feel like it's something we need to get comfortable with.
And no, you're right. We need to get comfortable being uncomfortable with that. Right. And I think because women have struggled for so long, and I'm sure this is a male thing too, but I see it a lot more with women in the church. And when I say the church, I mean the Big C church for the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years have tried to say, and I've heard sermon after sermon, no, you are enough. I mean, I've seen women with tattoos that says you're enough. Here's the problem. We're not, because we are fallen creatures. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not worthy. It doesn't mean that we're not loved unconditionally by God. It doesn't mean that we are like, oh, God's pointing his finger at us and we're bad. No. We're not enough because of our sinful nature. And if we were enough, we wouldn't need Jesus.
That's right.
If we were perfect, then why would we need a Savior? Why would we need to rely on God? So when we're not enough, because we fall short, the Bible says we all fall short of God's glory. And we're just not perfect, and we never will be, but God still desires for us to strive for excellence, and we do that by relying on him.
Right.
And I mean, if everything was perfect, then he wouldn't be glorified, and that's why we're here.
And I think the concept of being worthy, like I have a saying I put in my book, we might not feel worthy, but we're worth it.
Yeah.
In other words, we're worth what Christ paid on the cross for. It's the fact that the mercy of God said, it doesn't matter if you're not worthy. I took care of it.
Yeah.
You're not going to be punished for it, so just get on with life.
Right.
And I know for myself, you talk about the desires of your heart verse, Psalm 37:4. The one that's delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. Oh boy, does that one keeps kicking me around. Man, I struggle with that a lot. Tell me what your thoughts are on that verse.
Well, I mean, we read that and we're like, oh, I remember, I gotta be careful what I say. There was a celebrity, I'm just gonna say it. Okay, so Oprah, she was like, God will give me the desires of my heart. And she was, in a sense, preaching this. And it's like, hold on a second. Just because you have a desire in your heart doesn't necessarily mean that that's from, like, I desire sin. There's parts of me that desire sin.
The heart is wicked.
So is God going to give that to me? No. Just because there's something in your heart that you desire doesn't mean that that is from the Lord and that God's going to give it to you. It's the desires that God has put in you that he wants to give you. So, and that's between you and the Lord. You got to figure out, is this from the Lord or not? I mean, there was a time in my life where I think I was like 21 and I wanted to be a rock star, and I had to rest with, that was the desire of my heart.
Let me go there for a minute. I could see that.
Yeah, I got the Kate Bush 80s vibes going on with my hair right now.
All right, I'm done now.
But like, I wanted to perform because there's just always been the desire in my heart to perform, and I wanted to be a rock star, but I knew that there was the desire of my heart, but it wasn't the desire that God put in my heart. God put different desires in my heart. And again, it's between you and the Lord to figure out, okay, which desires are from you, which desires are mine.
Well, there's this commercial I've seen recently that talks about the 2 best days of your life are the day you were born and the day you discovered why. What does that have to do with this conversation?
So when you are a driven person, you're looking to achieve as much as possible. You don't have to tell a driven person, oh, just listen to all the podcasts, read the book Atomic Habits. Like, you don't have to tell, they've already done it. They're already doing it. They're already working super hard to achieve. However, if they don't hone in their purpose, they don't hone in where they're gifted and they're talented. They're going to stem in several different directions. And what that's going to create is mediocrity. Okay, you may have a ton of labels after your name. You may have author, MD, whatever letters you want to put after somebody's name. You may have a whole slew of things, but if it's not what is your purpose, and if it doesn't fit with your gifts and talents, it's all going to be mediocre and it's not going to mean a whole lot. So in the book, I talk about how to really narrow down your purpose. When I was a children's pastor, and it was 2020, it was right before the shutdown, I knew that it was my time to leave. I knew that my time was coming into an end, and I didn't know what to do. I contacted a friend of mine, John. He's kind of like the pastor of pastors. He was a senior pastor for many years in Michigan, and now he counsels pastors in Michigan. Gotcha. And he's just a wonderful man. So I called him, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Here's where I'm at, and I laid it all out, and he's like, okay, here's your homework. And I'm like, oh, thank God, someone's going to tell me what to do, because if someone's going to try to ask me to figure it out, I just can't. Like, just tell me what to do. He said, I want you to put 3 circles connecting. I don't remember what that's called, but it's, you do it a lot in school where you compare things. Right. So, and it's in the journaling portion of the book. So he said, in 1 circle, you're going to write what you're gifted at. What are you talented at? What are you good at?
Okay. Are these natural gifts or spiritual gifts?
It could be anything.
Okay.
Anything that you are just naturally good at. Well, I know how to talk, and I can talk to anybody in a room. So these are the things that I'm putting. Whether it's leadership ability, anything. It could be hard or soft skills. Doesn't matter. What are you good at? He said, and the next circle is going to be your passion. What are you passionate about? What can you spend hours doing? And it's as if time stood still. You just all of a sudden you look at the clock, 5 hours went by, but you thought it was just like a few minutes.
Right.
What are the things that you talk about with people that you get excited about, and maybe even talk fast because you're so excited about it? What makes you want to get up in the morning? And then he said, in the third box, I want you to put your mission. What is it that you would be willing to suffer for? What is it in the world that makes you angry, that you want to see solved? That maybe you can't solve the problem, but man, you'd really like to put a dent in it. What do you want to fight for?
Right.
And that's a big one, because we're all created to fight for something. Look at all these protests happening right now on college campuses. All of us are created to fight for something. We just have to find out what was it that we were created to fight for.
Right.
And then he said, you're going to marry the 3 together. And that's where you're going to really find your purpose and kind of narrow that in. So it helps when I say, oh my gosh, I see I have a friend, Ben, and he is flipping houses. And it looks so cool. He's just documenting everything on social media, tearing apart these houses and remodeling them, decorating them for Airbnbs. And I'm like, I want to do that. Oh, wait, hold on. Look at my list. Does it fit my list? Right. I could do that, and I could add that to my whole list of achievements.
Right.
But that's what's going to happen to the things that I'm supposed to do. The ball's going to drop, or it's going to become mediocre. I could be learning more in this area where I'm gifted and talented in, or the purpose that I'm supposed to be doing. Or I can spread myself so thin doing things that I probably shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And
well, I certainly experienced that a lot in mine. Let me just tell you a little bit of my story, because I grew up at 13 years old, starting to play the clarinet, and said, I'm going to be a professional clarinetist. That was it. I knew it. That was it. That was my trajectory. There I go. And I did that, okay? I was performing and teaching and doing like administrative type work my whole career. Still do. But as I was doing that, I noticed that there were other gifts that I had and passions that didn't align with my passions and my values and what I wanted to do, and it felt like something was missing. So when I was going through a really tough part of my journey, I was in this place where, who am I? What am I? Why am I doing this clarinet thing?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I started writing songs. Okay. And that just kind of birthed out of that, because I needed it for my journey I call it my journey journal.
Yeah.
So I needed it for that. And then I started writing that. And then from there, I'm all of a sudden recognizing that my bigger purpose and what I get passionate about and what I fight for is people not seeing who they are. You were on the radio, and I'm like, you're reaching people for Jesus, Rachel? Come on, But it wasn't a direct shoot, so you didn't feel like it was enough. You're not on K-Love, or I don't know, whatever is a big thing for radio. I got stuck, and so then when I wrote the book, it was like everything came together because it made me realize that I love to write, always have loved to write. That's in my first circle that you talk about. And then my passion was about making sure people realize, hey, you really are cool the way you are.
Yeah.
You don't have to be something or achieve something, although those are things that God wants us to do. Because once we get over this feeling of not feeling good enough, then I'm not worried if I'm doing a good job at it or not. I'm just doing the best I can.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then everything came together. And so now I'm doing all these things, and everything is bringing me contentment and joy. But I'm still playing my clarinet. I'm still teaching my clarinet. I'm still doing administrative work. I'm still doing stuff here on the property that I'm passionate about. It's like it's all... For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm there and I'm happy with what I'm doing. And I don't need, it doesn't matter if I'm not Lisa Turquoise selling New York Times bestseller books.
Right.
I'm doing exactly what God called me to do. And it's a beautiful place to be. And then when I see other people, all I can do is, hey, that's cool. Like, I'm like really honestly, sincerely excited about this book. I can't wait to see where God takes this.
But you touched on a good point. When we figure out what our purpose is, it helps us be more excited for other people instead of feeling like we're in competition with them. If we know, instead of me feeling like I'm in competition with my friend Ben, who I'm thinking, wow, he's doing something really cool, I know that I'm not meant for that. And I can be like, Ben, that is so neat.
Yeah,
like,
go
good
for it,
for
dude.
you.
Yeah,
I am excited that you're sharing this adventure on socials and I get to go along with you, even though I don't get to do it myself. Like, how cool.
Yeah. And I think that it also settles us that we can be more focused and concrete in what we're doing. Say, okay, like for instance, some of the activities we do here at the property, we specifically want them to be for smaller groups so there's more intimacy. Okay, when somebody says, well, how many people or what is this? I'm sort of like, well, that's who came, and I'm okay with that.
But it can make you feel like, oh, that wasn't good enough because I only had 5 people.
According to who?
Right.
And I think that Desires of the Heart verse changed for me when I looked at it as, okay, the first part says, delight yourself in the Lord.
Yep.
Do you think maybe God knows better what my desires of the heart are than me?
Yeah.
When I finally let that go and said, actually, like, I'll be honest with you, I never expected to be living on a 14-acre property with a farm ministry, and this wasn't in my vision, but the purpose of it is.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, how did that happen? Well, God knew what would make me happier more than I did. Is it possible? He knows that.
Yeah.
Wow. I do want to talk about one chapter before we let you go.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many chapters, and listeners, I really hope you'll grab this book because I think it's going to just resonate, if not one chapter, another. But there is one chapter I loved that you talked about hormones.
Oh, yeah. I talk a lot about hormones.
And what this quest for achievement and how hormones relate. Tell us about that a little bit.
Okay, so I talk a lot about King David. And in the book is really set up where you can kind of journal afterwards, and I tell bits and pieces of David's story. And we talk a lot in the church about David and Goliath. You hear that story quite a bit. But when I read it, I think David had to have been on such an adrenaline high. Not just adrenaline, but dopamine. Right. And if people don't know what dopamine is, we talk a lot about it nowadays because of ADHD. ADHD is a lack of dopamine. And dopamine is that feel-good hormone. That when you achieve something, your dopamine goes up. But there are different ways that you can get dopamine. When people go to a casino and they put the coin in the slot machine, and then all of a sudden money comes out. There's a shot of dopamine that you get. And that's one of the reasons why people get addicted to gambling or addicted to drugs. What they're doing is they're, in a sense, getting addicted to that dopamine. Pornography. Yep. People get addicted to pornography because it's giving you that shoot of dopamine, and it's a cheap way to get dopamine. But for us who are driven, we get those shots of dopamine through what we achieve. And we can also get an adrenaline high. So I look at David, who not only is high on dopamine because he just killed this giant, but he did something magnificent that was kind of a flight or fight experience. Right. And he chose to fight. And that pushes your adrenaline up. And you can just be on this magnificent
and your cortisol
high.
Levels, right?
And yeah, a little bit. I think so too. Like because cortisone is given by stress. And so, yeah, there could be, depending on the adrenaline. I think he might have been stressed. Yeah, I don't know. He seemed pretty chill. He's like, I come before you in the name of heaven's armies. I'd be like, right. So maybe he was, I don't know. But adrenaline can bring cortisol depending on if the adrenaline is stress or if it's one of those, like adrenaline junkie type things where you're jumping out of an airplane. So there's different ways that we get these hormones. But what happens is, and I didn't realize this, I think, until after I wrote my last book. I was on this achievement high. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, like I was in this deep, low depression. And I asked a friend of mine who was a pastor, can you just pray for me? Like, I am really struggling with purpose. I'm not doing enough. Like, I feel like I'm not making an impact on the world. And he goes, I find that really ironic since you just wrote a book. Like, you just published a book. But it was because I was dropping from that low. Yes. Preachers experience too.
I do it. I've done it with performing. Mm-hmm. You know, you go for the performance, and you're all working up for the performance. You do the performance, and then after, there's such a thing as like a performance high. Yeah.
I noticed that one Mother's Day I preached. It was one of those messages where people were crying and at the altar, and people are coming up to me like hugging me and crying, and it changed your life. And it was one where you're like, okay, I know I wasn't flawless, but I actually did a really good job, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I was on this high 1 or 2 days after Mother's Day of, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And then all of a sudden I hit this major low.
Well, and you just have to do it again, right?
Right, and you have to do it again. And I couldn't figure out, why am I having this low? Like, why am I suddenly depressed? Because I went from a high, and all this, now the adrenaline and the dopamine is coming down. So what do we do when we want to achieve? We need to get that adrenaline and dopamine back.
Yeah. I read this thing not too long ago about the difference between dopamine and oxytocin. Mm-hmm. And oxytocin, can be... it's usually the feel-good drug after sex, I'll be honest.
It's a bonding hormone. Yeah, it's the bonding hormone.
And it even says if you kiss your spouse for 6 seconds, you still get an oxytocin release. Oh, so me and my husband, we've been trying that.
All right, 6 seconds, hold it.
Yeah. So, we can't deny that these kind of chemical functions affect our perspective. Yeah. It's good to get those in balance, or to make sure we understand and be aware of that's happening.
And that's why I wanted to put that chapter in there. Like, recognize that this is a thing. This is why when you achieve something, you feel a million miles high, but then a few days later, all of a sudden you're depressed and you don't know why. Recognize that it's the hormones in your body, and it's okay.
Right.
You're not crazy.
No, you're not. It's just kind of the natural progression of things. There's so many good chapters in this book, and we could talk about this all day, but I'm first of all hoping people will get your book.
Me too.
But secondly, what do you really hope readers will feel when they're reading this book, or experience when they're reading this?
One, I want them to recognize, because the book is driven towards driven people. Now, I know that there are people out there that have gotten the book. They're not necessarily driven, and that's okay. They just feel like an underachiever and they want it. But those that are really highly driven, my prayer is that, one, they would see that they're more accomplished than they think they are. Mm-hmm. But two, they're going to recognize where a lot of their energy should be going. Should it be that I need to get one more doctorate degree, or maybe should I put the books away so I can spend the afternoon with my kids? Recognizing what exactly matters most in this life. Is it the fact that I spent every spring or every winter down south helping with hurricane victims? Like, yeah, that's a noble thing. But if my family suffers because of it and they don't know who I am because I traveled off to go help other people, what good is that?
And, the other thing you talk about in the book, too, is you call them scenes. You call them scenes instead of seasons, which,
Right.
It's
a theater theme, so I use themes of
scenes.
scenes.
But I love the fact that, you talk about scenes because there are certain times of your life that you're not able to achieve.
Right.
Okay, a parent is dying or a kid is sick. There's all kinds of things that keep us from achieving at certain times. So if we're caught on the bug or the chemical rush or whatever it is of achieving, when we're in those times, where are we going to be? Then we're going to get, we very easily could get depressed because, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
Okay, but you are.
But you are. So I talk about in the book, when my daughter was 3-4, she was going to preschool. The bus would go pick her up, and then it would just be me and my little boy. I just had the 2 kids at the time. And every morning, we would just sit and watch Good Morning America. And he'd be, like, snuggled up against me. And it was a sweet time to be with my little boy, who really, in real life, was a hellion at the time. But at least at that moment, he was, sitting and snuggling with Mom. And I would watch these news anchors, and they were beautiful women. They're living in high-rise Manhattan apartments, which to me is like, that would be my ultimate dream. Most of my friends, they want to live on farms with goats. I would rather live in a high-rise apartment in a big, huge city with this huge, successful career. And I'm like, they have it all. They have this beautiful home in a big city with kids, married, and they have this career. And they're sharing news about different things that are happening in the world. The hurricane or the earthquake, that big earthquake in Haiti that happened back in the early 2000s. And so every day you see people, the National Guard and different military and different missions groups are going down to help with these people. And I'm just like, I just want to do that. I felt like I was going to crawl out of my skin. I'm stuck at home. That's how I felt. I'm stuck. And I loved my son, loved my family, so it's not that I didn't love them or I regretted them, but I was struggling because I wanted to go out in the world and do something and serve these people. And the Holy Spirit just spoke to my heart and said, Rachel, natural disasters are not going away. And it didn't solve the problem that was going on. But it calmed my spirit. Okay, I am here at this moment to love on my son. These formative years are a big deal, and I am achieving by snuggling. It may not feel like it, but to snuggle with him and to have breakfast together and to sit on the couch and read a book, those things are achievement because I am helping raise a well-rounded future man.
Right.
And this time is important. It doesn't feel like an achievement now because it's mundane, and I talk a lot about that in the book, that as highly driven people, we would rather experience a ton of pain than go through the mundane of life. So, but this is so mundane, but it is achieving. And one day, I might get to go and help with a natural disaster. And a few years later down the road, my daughter, who was 12 at the time, her and I went down and we helped with Hurricane Harvey. So we got to do it. No, I didn't get to go to Haiti and help with the earthquake, but
at that time, in that scene
of life, but there will be scenes when I get to go and help other people that are in distress.
So, I mean, just in closing, I'm thinking of this just reframes this concept of what is success? What is achievement? I mean, in Ecclesiastes, they talk about, it's all vanity, try everything, right? And then at the end, he says, well, really, it's just to praise God and enjoy your day. I mean, that's the purpose of life, is to praise God and enjoy your day. So I always think, well, maybe the praising helps us enjoy.
Right.
So, I mean, and you talk about gratefulness in the book as well. But what do you think? I mean, how do we come to terms with the meaning of what success is? Isn't it different as different and unique for every person?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But also I believe it's the biggest thing because we see in our world, and I'm saying the Western world. I don't necessarily know what the Middle East or the Eastern world sees as success. But here in the West, we see love, money, and power as success. But those can easily become idols in our lives. When you talk to any police officer, any detective, they'll tell you that all crime falls under those three categories: love, money, power. But those are meant to be gifts, and just like any gift that God gives, people twist. People twist sex, people twist marriage, people twist the love for their children. They twist things, and love can easily turn into lust. Money can easily turn into to greed, and then power can turn into pride. But what did Jesus say? He said, "I came not to be served, but to serve."
About a month or so ago at work was our annual retirement luncheon. This luncheon honored those who were retiring or moving on. Well, this time it was my turn. At first, I felt uncomfortable about it. After all, I tried to quietly do my job as unto the Lord, and getting kudos felt, well, kind of off. But I'm glad I changed my mind and went. 3 of us were retiring. We shared a lunch and a cake with our colleagues, but individually, each of us was honored by words specifically from those who worked with us. When hearing what others said, deep down, I could sense the affirmation. I realized that yes, the words were about the person's talent, personality, and their contributions, but they also described the person's character, like hardworking, kind, dedicated. In other words, isn't who we are about who we are when we're achieving? I know it's not really easy to look at this differently. In the past, when I was unhappy about who I was, "Why not me?" was my mantra. Mostly, I'll be honest, it was when I started comparing myself to others. Slowly, I began to understand Romans 12:3, which states, "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly with sound judgment." 2 phrases stand out for me in that verse: soberly and sound judgment. It wasn't until I truly understand how God sees me that my perspective turned sober, and I had sound judgment. Now I not only enjoy the differences between people, but I try to celebrate people. Dr. John Deloney, a counselor with Ramsey Solutions and author of Building a Non-Anxious Life, said on a Facebook post recently, "We have a cultural virus. Here's what it is. We are not allowed to celebrate. If something good happens and you celebrate, you're a jerk. You have some sort of privilege that someone else doesn't, or you have some sort of something that isn't fair." I wonder, what would happen to our feelings of underachievement if our simple victories were celebrated? And friends, in order to celebrate, don't we have to take notice? So, until next time, take notice.